Right now, the focus is on the playoffs by pretty much every basketball fan for obvious reasons, but for the other half of the league, their offseason has already begun, and the teams in rebuild mode are already planning their next course of action in their pursuit to get back to the top by way of building a strong young core. This brings us to the topic of today's video, where we'll be going through all 8 NBA teams that are currently in a rebuild phase, and we'll be discussing the biggest bright spot of their rebuild. This can include a specific player or group of players, it can be the assets that they've accumulated that they have at their disposal, or it could even just be the flexibility that they have based on the way that they've spent their money. It all depends case by case. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first rebuilding team we'll be discussing today is the Detroit Pistons, and their biggest bright spot is currently their young backcourt. The Pistons drafted Cade Cunningham #1 overall 2 years ago, and they drafted Jaden Ivey in the lottery last year, and honestly, both picks are looking pretty dang good thus far. Cunningham's season was unfortunately cut short early on this year due to injury, but before that, he was averaging about 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, and his ability to command the offense and make plays for those around him is going to help take Jaden Ivey's game to another level next year when Cunningham's back healthy. Ivey is an incredibly explosive guard with the kind of speed that ranks up there with the fastest players in the entire NBA, so his biggest strength is attacking the basket off the dribble, but what I found very important about his game is that he ranked above average as a spot-up shooter this year and improved steadily as the season went on, so with him most likely playing as the shooting guard alongside Cade Cunningham moving forward, his ability to spot up as a reliable threat from deep will be crucial. He's going to get more open looks playing off of Cunningham, and then when defenses start to overextend on his 3-ball, he can use that blistering speed of his to attack and make even more plays, so that's a dynamic that the Pistons should be excited to build upon. The next rebuilding team up is the Charlotte Hornets, and the biggest bright spot about their rebuild right now is LaMelo Ball. I'll be honest here, LaMelo gets the nomination for this list almost by default because there isn't much else to be excited at this point in time about their rebuilding decisions or direction. Terry Rozier and Gordon Hayward are still under contract, and then there are a few other younger players on the roster that have shown promise, but not to the degree that would warrant praise like this. LaMelo already has an All-Star nomination on his resume, and he stuffs the stat sheet on a nightly basis, averaging about 23 points, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds per game, while shooting over 10 threes a night and making them at a 38% clip. He's not perfect by any means, he can sometimes play out of control and take ill-advised shots, his defense leaves a lot to be desired, and his flashy play style doesn't necessarily translate to winning basketball yet, but he's definitely a quality talent to have as a rebuilding team. The next rebuilding team up is the Orlando Magic, and the biggest bright spot of their rebuild right now is their young front court. Specifically, when I say this, I want to focus on the duo of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. However, there are definitely other guys in the mix that have some promise too. Wagner was drafted 2 seasons ago, and out of all of the guys at the top of that draft, he was probably the most underrated of the group, and yet 2 years later, he's one of the best players from that class, scoring an efficient 19 points a night, demonstrating a much more advanced ability to create his own offense than originally advertised. He's also already acting as the team's closer down the stretch of games, so finding a guy who thrives in close games is a nice bonus on top of it all. Then you look at Paolo Banchero, who was the #1 overall pick in last year's draft, and he's about to be named the Rookie of the Year this season. He's already a 20-point scorer with the combination of strength and skill that makes him a tough cover for any opposing forward. Wendell Carter Jr. is also on a team-friendly contract and is a key part of their defense, so the fact that they have their 3 front court players covered is good stuff. The next rebuilding team up is the Indiana Pacers, and the biggest bright spot of their rebuild right now is Tyrese Haliburton. Haliburton, as we speak, is already one of the best point guards in the NBA at just 23 years old. In his first full season as the #1 option on the team, he posted averages of about 21 points and 10 assists per game, ranking second in the entire league in assists. He's also the pillar of efficiency, making 49% of his shots and 40% of his threes, so when it comes to being able to take command of an offense, Haliburton is up there with the very best of them. Because of the fact that Haliburton is already so good and his playstyle theoretically can work with any kind of player, his talent makes the life of the Pacers front office so much easier because they don't have to second guess about which kind of players they should be targeting, because Haliburton is there to help make them better no matter what their skill set is. Now over to the Western Conference rebuilding teams, the biggest bright spot of the Oklahoma City Thunder's rebuild right now is the fact that they're already competitive while still rebuilding. The Thunder, in my opinion, are the best young team in the entire NBA by a long shot. On paper, most people looked at their roster and viewed them as a bottom feeder before this year began, but they play as hard or harder than any other team in the league every night. They have so many young forwards that bring it on both ends of the floor. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is already one of the best scorers in the entire league, and Josh Giddey is even breaking out as one of the most well-balanced contributors at his age as well. They were as close as it gets to making the playoffs this year before losing the final game of the play-in tournament, but while other teams in rebuild mode would be hesitant to go all out trying to win games because it affects their draft placement, the Thunder don't have to worry about that because they own pretty much everyone else's draft picks. Obviously, that's just an exaggeration, but the truth in that is that in the next 5 years, the Thunder own 14 first-round picks, so they can continue shooting for as many wins as they can. They can hold those picks and continue to take chances on landing new young stars. They could package them together and go out and trade for an established star, or they could honestly do both, because they have so many. So the fact that they have so many options while the team is improving at the rate that it is makes their competitive rebuild a masterpiece. The next rebuilding team up is the Houston Rockets, and the biggest bright spot of their rebuild right now is all of the cap space they've created for themselves. The Rockets have been criticized by those around the league for their lack of structure during this period, but this is about to be a huge offseason for them, where that could change for the better. They've already hired Ime Udoka as their new head coach, who brings an established winning voice, having brought the Celtics to the finals last season, and with him at the helm, they will be looking to take big steps forward. Jalen Green is one of the brightest young scoring talents in the league, and Alperen Şengün has flash talent as a playmaking big man that has drawn comparisons to a young Nikola Jokic, but the biggest reason why they could be about to turn it around is because they have so much money to spend, being able to possibly afford to pay 2 max contracts. There have been rumors floated out there all year long that they might want to bring James Harden back to Houston, and they have the money to do so. His playmaking is exactly what this Rockets team is missing. Then on top of that, they have the money to add a few more pieces to the group with the remaining cap space that could help take them even further. That could come in the form of another star caliber player, or it could be by way of signing a few quality role players, but either way, I think the Rockets are about to make some noise. The next rebuilding team up is the San Antonio Spurs, and their biggest bright spot right now is their overall flexibility. The Spurs are in a position where they could take this tank in a couple different directions at their own discretion. They're in position to land one of the best prospects in this year's draft class, depending on how the lottery shakes out, so obviously they're going to hope to land Victor Wembanyama, but even guys like Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller would be good fits for what they're building right now. On top of that, similar to a few teams that we've already discussed, they have their own vault of draft capital that includes 11 first-round picks over the next 5 years. Then on top of all of that, Keldon Johnson is the only player signed to any kind of contract paying out big money, and while Devin Vassell will be next in line for a payday, they still have a ton of cap space, with even more potentially opening up if they choose to move on from players like Doug McDermott and Devontae Graham. The Spurs are still a ways away from being competitive, but the flexibility they have to go about this process is vital. And finally, the last rebuilding team we'll be discussing is the Utah Jazz, and the biggest bright spot of their rebuild is their treasure chest of draft picks. This was the first year in the post-Gobert and Mitchell era for the Jazz, and they were essentially playing with house money. From the 2 trades, they combined to bring in 7 first-round picks and 3 first-round pick swaps by giving up those 2 stars. I was tempted to pick Lauri Markkanen for this list because his emergence this year was incredible to watch, but realistically, the fact that the Jazz already have so many draft assets at their disposal makes it so much easier to start over in this capacity. They're the kind of team now that can take chances on young players in need of a second chance. They can take some riskier swings in certain drafts because they have so many selections most years, and if we're being completely honest, Utah has never really been a big free agent destination, so building through the draft was always going to have to be their recipe for success. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you think about these rebuilding teams moving forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.